Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artists Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast brought to you by the South Coast Artists Index. And today we have a distinguished guest. All of our guests are special, but in this particular case, we have a distinguished guest, and you'll find out why. So I'm going to have our guest introduce themselves and spell their name for us, please.
Hi, my name is Pamela Hoss, Pamela Hoss, as in Sam.
Do you ever get horse versus Hoss?
Yes.
And I'm sure other spelling variations that I'm not quick enough to think about right now.
Yeah.
Amazing, isn't it? That's why I have people spell their name, because if you're listening to this in the car or something like that, and then you're like, oh, I want to Google that person or whatever, it's like, God, how do you spell their name?
Yeah.
So, wow. There's just so much to talk about with you. So we're going to start at the beginning. We both have a connection to Southeastern Massachusetts University and all its manifestations, and the fine arts department. And so tell us, where'd you come from? How'd you get into art?
Well, I grew up in Massachusetts in the town of Rockland. And I guess I was the youngest of 10 children. So we always were able to express ourselves freely. We grew up on a farm in an old farmhouse. And, I remember watching Judy Garland or Hattie Page, singing and using their body as an expression of the song. And I'd go into my mother, the bedroom, and I'd draw rectangles of women singing. And I didn't realize it until years later that, here I am at 75 years old, still doing.
Now, did you draw these things on the wall? Or did you did.
Yeah. I mean, we would, basically wreck the house, but it was all okay. We could hold puppet shows or draw or paint on the wall. My mother sent us to the Museum of Fine Arts, where on Saturday during the winter, and just going through the museum and seeing the artwork, influenced me. But primarily my older siblings became visual artists. The first girl, Ellie Shaw, is in her 80s, and she just had a 60-year retrospective of her paintings at a museum in West Virginia, where she's, really recognized as an important artist in the state. My sister, Virginia Frazina, is a visual artist, and she's in her 80s and she still practices. My brother, Peter Hoss, went to BU and studied with Guston, and he's living in Massachusetts and is a practicing artist. So, and my sister Madeline does botanical painting and writes poetry. So, yeah, I've always had role models, but I've always enjoyed, drawing or painting.
Wow. When you said your brother Peter studied with Philip Guston, I mean my eyeballs nearly popped out of my head. Um, his work is important, but his attitude was, to me, so much more important. His attitude is what made his work. But I don't want to go there right now. Wow. So, would you, with the three of you, one, two, three, the four of you, um, say that it was because of, well, your Summer Hill kind of upbringing? Summer Hill was one of those new, I guess, new age schools before they called them new age. It was an alternative school where it allowed children to develop on their own within, I guess, certain guidelines, if not few guidelines.
I think so. But primarily with me, it was probably the older siblings as role models. And, when I was in high school, it's interesting. Recently, I've gotten together with Marie Peters, who was my art teacher, and she's a practicing artist. She's retired, obviously, and she's a practicing artist, has a studio in Rockland. And I visited her this year, and it was so meaningful to, get together with a teacher that gave me the freedom to do what I wanted. She gave other students assignments, but I was always just driven to, draw or paint the female figure performing. And it's interesting, but it was really wonderful to get together with her. And she appreciated, me developing as an artist, and I appreciated her, and I respected her work quite a bit. But
there was a
but,
post
yeah.
in Facebook. I don't remember who posted it now, but this individual was devastated by their elementary school art teacher.
Oh, huh.
I think you may have responded to it as well. I know I certainly did.
I don't remember.
But just the opposite of your experience.
Yeah, yeah. And the same held true, when I went to Southeastern Massachusetts University in 1966.
Now, who did you have there?
Well, the faculty that I had, it was Bill Elliott, who was right out of graduate school from RISD. And so I had Bill, I had Frank McCoy, Herb Cummings, and Ed Togneri.
We have the same teachers.
Yeah, and they were all, I don't remember. I remember them giving me complete freedom to express myself in the drawing and painting classes. It was never, a tutorial where, everyone was painting the same thing, or even in figure drawing. It was just, I guess because, I was just independent enough to just be driven to do what I needed to do. It was interesting. It was during a time of the abstract expressionists, and I was working from observation. But once again, I was given the freedom to continue and got good direction. I think when I graduated, I continued to go back to visit, and it was so much fun. They'd always have a jug of wine in an office, and they'd all come in and want to know what you were up to. And I think because I continued to be very active in the arts, whether I was a teacher or primarily just doing my work, they always were interested. They were always, supportive and interesting for years later. Even Frank, who lived
in Pinnerm, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he lived for a long time. And when I went to his funeral service at whatever church in Paid Aram,
St. Peter's.
it was filled with former students that I could just connect with that I had never met, but it was so nice. Joe Diggs, and I can't remember the names right now, but it was so nice to connect with these people that had the same experience I did with that faculty. And whatever I chose to do in life, whether it was teaching on the high school level or teaching on the college level, it always seemed as though I think because of my background with them, that I succeeded
You
in,
still stand on their shoulders?
yeah, I succeeded because of their support.
Now, for me, it was an excellent experience. Bill Elliott always withheld the compliments and always nudged me with these little comments. And his silence was more dangerous than his words. Because if he was silent, that meant he was struggling to find something good to say, because he never shredded me. Herb Cummings was one of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life. I always say I've never met another Quaker Buddhist or Buddhist Quaker. There's a long story there. And Ed Tornieri was like an old uncle or a grandfather, and his influence reached all the way down south to grad school, which was totally amazing. He knew what it was, what I was up to. And Frank McCoy was the one that perplexed me the most. He was very, very quiet, very, very gentle. And it wasn't until I was teaching a drawing class, I got really, really frustrated with him. I shouted out, "God damn it, it's big, flat shapes. Oh my God, Frank, I finally understand. I've got to apologize." But that's my experience. But I've spoken to a lot of women, and this is where I'm going with this. And a lot of women felt that, well, it was the times, this was just pre-feminism or on the cusp of, they didn't feel that they received the support that they needed because they were women. And I have a sidebar regarding Ed Tornieri about that.
Oh, well, I think of all the faculty, I think Frank was the most supportive with me. And just, I don't know how many letters of recommendation he wrote for me. And they were lengthy and, very strong, wonderful letters. So he really supported me more than the other faculty. Although Bill was, I miss interacting with him, about my work. And yeah, I could always count on him. I had the studio at Hatch Street, and he would come and look at the work and give me wonderful feedback, valid, help me through periods. But now I can't think of what I was going to say. Well, we taught together, and it was he saw my strength in drawing, and the strength I had in drawing was from my own experience for years of drawing the figure. So it was a strength that I could bring to the classroom. And because I practiced it for so many years, and he saw that, and he celebrated it. I mean, we would hold drawing meetings together for the other faculty that were teaching drawing. And drawing is the only area within the fine arts program that was rated excellent. by the National Accreditation Committee. And it was, my love of drawing came from them. Or they would put drawing on such a high level. It was as if they were speaking of drawing on a religious level. And so for years, it was the only way that I expressed myself. It was, the most direct way. I mean, I raised a son as a single parent. I mean, his dad was alive and participated, but, I had to figure out so many different ways of earning a living because I wanted to set my life up as an artist so that I wouldn't have to work more than half the week so I could do my artwork the other half of the week. And somehow, I've always managed to do that, whether I started cleaning houses or, I was John Kerry's wife. I was her cook and gardener. I had a small scale catering job, delivering meals to people in Cambridge and Brookline, hot and ready to eat. And then I, got jobs at the museum school, Tufts University, Montserrat, a class here, there, and everywhere where you teach at 2 or 3 different schools. Mm-hmm. And finally, because of Frank, primarily, I got a job at UMass Dartmouth, or it was still SMU, but the year that I started in 1989, it turned into UMass Dartmouth. And then it was something about teaching at a school that I had, as an alumna, that the students, I really felt as though, first of all, they gave me more classes than the other schools, but I enjoyed sort of lighting a fire under the majority of each class and getting them to believe in themselves and really, understand the importance of drawing as artists. And I think, that, so I think the 2 most important things that I could do in life would be, or have been, to be a teacher and to, be an artist.
No, you're right. I mean, and going back to the women who seemed a little concerned or ruffled by their demeanors, that they were chauvinists and so on and so forth. I don't have anything specific, but I do remember Tornieri once. I used to have these like private moments with him in the hallway. And I always thought, wow, it's kind of cool. But then I've spoken to other people in my graduating class, the BFA class, and he gave private moments to everyone. It was kind of interesting. But in this particular case, he looked miserable. And I said, what's the matter? And he said, I hate teaching women. And I said, well, you better not say that too loud. And he said, no, you don't understand. You don't understand. Listen, there's some women in this classroom that would wipe the floor, use you guys to wipe the floor with. But I'm so frustrated because I know what's going to happen. They're going to get married. They're going to get pregnant. And they're going to put down their brush or their crayon, and they'll never pick it up again. And that really bothers me. And I mentioned that to a couple of women, and they were more not calmed by that statement. They were more incensed by it. I don't think they really heard what it was that he said. He knew, how traditional relationships went. and economies and so on and so forth. And it really, really did bother him. He was a very empathic man.
Mhm. Yeah.
The other thing too is at that time, Nicolaides was, the natural way to draw was the Bible of drawing.
Yeah.
And I don't know so much about Bill and Frank, or even Tonieri, because he had, I think, his own thing. But I know Herb Cummings was a disciple, an evangelist for Nicolaides.
Yeah. Frank was too. Frank and Bill. Yeah, Frank and Bill were both believers in that book. Yeah.
And going back to you and drawing women, how much of an influence was Degas on you?
Well, I think, well, just going to the Museum of Fine Arts, and I think the highlight of the Saturday visits was going to the restaurant for a tuna fish sandwich. And en route to the restaurant was the statue of the 14-year-old dancer. So I didn't realize until years later, that when there was a retrospective of Degas, I guess in New York, and there was the 14-year-old dancer, even though I had seen it many times at the Museum of Fine Arts. And even in the Museum of Fine Arts, stood there and, drew it on a few occasions just to understand what it was that influenced me. But I think, that little girl, I think it wasn't just the strength of her pose, it was the seriousness of the 14-year-old's face that, it wasn't sort of a prettified young woman. It was a woman doing something important. Although, in reading about Degas later in life, just who knows, she might have been sort of a sexual object for the wealthy men in France, after her performance. Who knows? But more than Degas, although I love Degas' drawings primarily, I just went to the main Manet Degas show in New York. And I think more than Degas, Goya has been a major influence. I went to graduate school later at the museum school, and got out in 1984. But I took a class with Eleanor Sayre, who has passed away since, but she was the curator of prints and drawings at the Museum of Fine Arts. And she let me audit the class because I was already writing my thesis for the museum school, and I wasn't about to write another one. But she let me audit the class, and she raised money for the class to go to Madrid for 2 weeks. And so I wrote my paper for the museum school on the Black paintings, and then was able to see the Black paintings in person in the Prado. But more than the Black paintings, I had access to a table in the Prado Library by myself, and the table must have been at least 16 feet long, filled with Goya's drawings on paper, wash drawings or dry drawings, you could lift the cover and see the drawing. There was nothing between me and the drawing. And it was as if he was in the room with me. I had looked at his work. I had looked at some of the work at the Museum of Fine Arts, but I had never seen such a large body of the drawings. Prints are expressive. Drawings are right from the artist to the page. And it was as if he was in the room with me. I think tears came to my eyes that, oh, geez, this is who Goya is. And
did you see the Caprichos at the MFA? Goya's Caprichos or Los Caprichos? It was a combination of etchings and preparatory drawings. Yeah. And did she curate that?
Yes, she wrote the book. And
that was a huge show.
Yeah, wasn't it a fabulous show?
Yeah. Well, the pieces were so small. So if you can imagine a space that would hold probably 20, 30 paintings, it seemed like hundreds of drawings and etchings that were in there.
If you think of why an artist wants to be an artist, or why does an artist need to be an artist? Why do you need to write, dance, perform, or draw, or paint, or sculpt? And I think his work was so powerful to me, and I think part of it was he was deaf. It was his way of expressing himself, and in private, the drawings weren't shown, until he died. And Eleanor Sayer organized the drawings, separated the notebooks, and so an artists need to speak, and some can speak very well, but most, I'm a visual artist because the best way for me to express what's most important that to me, and a lot of times I don't even know what that is that's most important to me to express at the time. But once you start working, there's an importance to it. And the importance is that you need to be heard.
Yeah, it's reflecting your surroundings. It's a whole bunch of things, and it varies from person to person, artist to artist. That's why Philip Guston was an inspiration to me.
Yeah.
He was a tier 1 ABEX, as they referred to him. He was a tier 1 abstract expressionist. I was shocked when I went to the MFA with my friend Bob Brodesky to check out the show there, because I did not know anything before the abstract expressionist period. I mean, he was so versatile. I was like surrealism, cubism. It was just like he was all over the place, and everything he touched was like you'd even know it was him. You thought it was another artist.
Yeah.
And then he had this inner turmoil that really had to come out.
Yeah.
I have to be brave enough to paint my own face. And he was stuck between infatuated with the KKK and with the Holocaust, because he was Jewish and he was from Montreal, where coincidentally Bob's family is from, and they could have been neighbors, we discovered. But he had to get this horror out. And yet when I was, when we were coming back home, I was on the highway, and I'm all I could think of is like, what was the big kerfuffle about 4 other major museums rejecting the work because they were afraid it was too antagonistic, it was too whatever. And I just didn't get it. And then, the warning, like a warning label before you entered a specific room. And I just thought maybe it's a cultural thing. Americans, I don't even want to go into that thing, but anyway. So we're on a highway, and all of a sudden it hit me. And what I got out of it was, they were saying, oh, you got a KKK guy sitting at his kitchen table, casually smoking a cigarette and having a cup of coffee. And then you got a guy, with his arm, dressed up in his Klan outfit, driving his car. And people were very, very much offended by it, but they totally missed, I think, the concept. And what he was trying to say was that you don't need that uniform, that outfit to know who these people are. That they're right out there in front of you. And he disarmed you in so many different ways. It's almost like Melville. I mean, Moby Dick is not Moby Dick. It's something else completely. And Philip Guston with those pinks and I mean, the guy could draw. And when you look at the chunkiness of his work, I think it's going to take maybe a couple of more decades before people finally realize what a genius this guy was. But that's my take anyway.
Yeah, I remember whatever statement he made in regards to his beautiful abstract paintings that were in, one of the best galleries in New York, and every one he did, he knew he would sell. But, whatever war was going on, and he said to himself, oh, I'm just painting pretty pictures. I've got to do something else. So I think the last works of his life, I think the first works I saw of the last series was at MIT, and they were his drawings on paper. They were in color with India ink and I think acrylic paint, but or tempera. But boy, they were, and they were all about his life, whether it was, a head smoking a cigarette or books on a table or a coffee pot, and they were his life. And then the huge show in New York before the MFA show, years before the MFA show, just the amount of work and the power of the figurative work, the need for the artist to express himself on that level was just so powerful.
Right. It was just to be brave. That was the battle. Is to have the courage.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, I mean, everybody came down on him hard.
Yeah, the gallery.
Right.
Yeah, and the critics.
Except for de Kooning. Well, de Kooning knew what it was like to get his ass kicked.
Yeah.
Because of the misogynism, chauvinism. I mean, the whole 9 yards. Let bring you back, because we're going to start wrapping this up. But so how many years have you been retired now?
This January, I'm retired 6 years.
Wow, that much time already, huh?
And I think that need to express myself is even more so now, because I'm not in front of a classroom talking about what I love or interacting with faculty. And I'm in a room by myself at least 5 days a week for most of the day. That need to express myself is I'm able to. It's wonderful that I'm able to continue having a life that I've always wanted.
Let's look at the arc from when you were a student. You were like 4 years ahead of me. To your retirement 6 years ago. And I know it's a sore subject with you, as it is with a lot of us, because we talked about these four guys. It was not going to school. It was joining a cult. There's no other way. I've seen people who have been away for so many years, and they still get emotional talking about their experience at SMU, SMTI. That's completely amazing. It's so amazing, and I've said this many times on the show. The power, the impact of these people. That when I was at my graduate school interview, the department chair wanted to know, in frank English, where the fuck did you go to school? And I thought, it was like, oh God, this is the end of the interview. And they're like, are there more of you? Please call up your friends, have them come down here. They were like totally, totally flabbergasted by the faculty that affected us. So from that beginning, and I saw Tony Miraglia maybe about 3 months ago at an opening at the Colo Colo. And he was really depressed. He said, Ron, and my connection with him is that I was on a student selection committee. And I always remembered him and the power of his work and, so on and so forth. He said, do you remember how many sections of drawing we had when you were there? I said, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't have even paid attention to it, He said, we had 11 sections of drawing. We're down to 2. And I think the power of that DNA of that drawing, whether it came directly from the 4, McCoy, Elliott, Togneri, or Cummings, or it came from somebody that we didn't interact with, that affected them, that just kept steamrolling. Because when I would go back for visits and I would see these massive drawings on the wall, I could say to myself, I can spot a SMUR, an SMU graduate, BFA graduate, anywhere just by their hands. And it wasn't as though we were monkeys, replicating the same thing. There was just something about that push-pull of tool on paper that was just so phenomenal. So now we go the full arc, and we have what I'm going to say, the closure of CVPA downtown. It wasn't a closure, it was an eviction. It was a palace coup. What the heck happened in that span of 50 years?
Yeah, I think, I don't really, I think, well, I think they had a dean in there for 2 years that thought what I was doing was something that belonged in the 19th century. So, luckily I was able to retire and didn't have to experience what went on. But unfortunately, all the part-time faculty that really helped build the program in drawing were let go. And, they were all doing an excellent job and, continued building the strength of the drawing program. But everything was just because of this dean that only stayed for 2 years, and then he went away. And then I don't know what the administration, I guess, I assume the administration, the president and the chancellor, I assume they don't understand the importance of what UMass Dartmouth had in fine arts. And, I think it's about enrollment. I know when I was there in the, Harvey Goldman was in the electronic imaging program, and he was a true believer in drawing, and he could tell, he stressed 4 semesters of drawing, are a requirement for the computer work, because the computer is not going to teach you to draw. And the people that stand out in the world of animated movies, their skill comes from a drawing and painting background. It's not, from what I read about people making movies. Also, Bill Elliott's son, I had for 3 years in drawing, and he's now given credits. He has helped Bill. He is making the award-winning movies. animated movies. He and
What's his first name? Because we have a family member who's
Colin Elliott.
Colin Elliott. Okay.
Yeah. And
because we have Brian Vincent Rhodes. He just premiered his short Pacemaker, and he's been out in Hollywood. I mean, just straight out of grad. I think he was at SCAD where he started.
Yeah, I think Colin went
Savannah College of Art and Designs.
I think Colin went to graduate school in California, but I think now he's in London, and his wife is an animator as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's a small community right there. A small but tight-knit community. But
he credits the he and his father and his mother both credit his visibility in that area because of his 4 years of drawing at UMass Dartmouth.
Well, we got to wrap this up, but I'm going to ask you Barbara Walters, or Baba Wawa. As you get older, you start making references to some of this, and you see the younger people scrunch up their nose, their face, like, what the heck did he just say? But the Barbara Walters question, if I gave you a magic wand and I gave you just one wish that had to be focused on your art or the arts in the South Coast community, what would that one wish be?
Yeah, I don't know. Say that again. If
I gave you a magic wand,
and
it was only good for one wish, not three. Okay. What would that wish be, and would it be used to affect you or the South Coast creative community, or they're interchangeable, or both?
I don't know. I think it would be nice to have a retrospective of my work in the South Coast, and I think I've enjoyed. I think the older you get, the harder it is to meet people and make friends, meaningful friends. And I think being in the South Coast, Scott and I bought a house in New Bedford, and when we go out, we always see, my former students, and it's so nice. They just embrace us, and we're part of, we hang out with them, and it's so enjoyable.
Yeah.
And, a lot of them are doing very meaningful things for this area, very meaningful. There's a woman, Cara Bean, who is just going to be publishing a book in January, and it's all about doodling to help young people get through their anxieties. She taught at Lexington High School for a number of years and realized the anxiety in young people. And so she's just, she left teaching and got into how drawing or doodling can help show or relieve stress. So she's going to be an artist in residence at the downtown,
the historic, the national park.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's so many. I just came from the studio of a former student who I've kept in touch with every year, and I don't know. He's just like a visual genius. I'm looking at a drawing, a self-portrait he did when he was in my class. A pencil drawing that it's just so reminiscent of Rembrandt. I went to his home this month and saw drawings, paintings, sculpture that was just enough, and models of boats. It was enough to make me think this young man is a visual. This man is a visual genius. Honestly, I think the Whaling Museum bought one of his boats for thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
A scale model of a
Exactly.
historical
Yeah.
recording.
Well, how does it feel to be part of his? How does it feel to be part of his history and part of his career?
Yeah, I love it. I love keeping in touch with these people that let me know that what they experienced at UMass had made a big difference in their lives. And so I feel as though what I've done in life and what I'm doing continues to be that I understand better understand the importance of what I've done.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We're going to wrap it up, and I do want to have you come back onto the podcast, the show, because there's a lot of institutional memory that you have that spans a good period of time. Once I left, unfortunately, I just could not get back in there. It was well, for a couple of reasons. One of them was I had to do, I had to find employment that paid for bills. And it was just not possible to balance that. And there's a bunch of other personal things as well. But the institutional memory of that place is something that intrigues me. And also, I really believe that, Swain and SMU are connected at the hip. There's a DNA somehow. I think it's Tornieri was, and I've said this several times before, Tornieri, I believe, was on faculty there first, and was called to start the department at UMass, well, SMU, SMTI. And he was a student of Hoffman, as was David Loeffler Smith. And so there's to me, a very intriguing history that really needs to be told. And the more I think of it, the more determined I am to try to get that documented. But at the same time, the more we dig back and the more we see the roots, the progenitors, and so on and so forth, the sadder I become at how it's running into its demise now, which is unfortunate. So, folks, thank you so much for joining us. We had Pamela Hoss, distinguished artist and former drawing instructor, professor or instructor?
Faculty,
former drawing faculty at UMass Dartmouth, previous to that, Southeastern Massachusetts University. And thanks so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.